Welcome to the Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Ado. This is your business thought leadership program that brings you nuggets of insights from the work and lives of men and women who have scaled the daunting heights of either starting their own businesses and managing institutions both here at home and around the world. My guest today is, first of all, a lawyer, and she spent most of her career practicing corporate law in the banking sector. Over the last 10 years, she spent her experience applying her experience to corporate governance as a corporate governance consultant. Mrs. Marian Barnor is my guest. You're welcome to the Executive Lounge.
Thank you, Isha.
It's so great to have you. Corporate governance is something that intrigues me a lot, and it's a word that has been bandied around quite often, especially with what's happened in the banking sector recently.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that we can learn a lot from you today.
Okay. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share my thoughts on a subject which I'm very passionate about.
Fantastic. This will make for a great conversation. So let's learn a little about you. You did work in the banking sector.
Yeah.
Share with us some of the some parts of that journey.
Okay. It's my experience in corporate law that led me into getting very interested in corporate governance, because I started as a lawyer in the legal department, and later on I had the opportunity to become company secretary.
Right.
And I served as a company secretary, luckily, over 4 different boards.
Wow.
And different chairpersons and different directors. And that is where I realized the importance of a board of directors in corporate governance. Because if you have a good and effective board, it translates into the results of a company. I also had the opportunity of representing my bank on several boards. So it gave me the experience in boardroom practice. Different boards, different personalities, different chairpersons. And together with my legal background, it set me thinking about what I should do after I exit the bank. And I thought corporate governance at that time was really new. So I thought that maybe let me develop my interest in corporate governance. And here I am today.
Wow, that's interesting. So why is corporate governance so important?
Wow. Corporate governance is important, and I'll tell you something that will surprise you maybe, because it affects everybody. Every individual in Ghana or in society is affected by corporate governance. And let me explain. As an individual, you may not be working in a corporate, because sometimes when we use the word corporate, we think it's restricted to a company. But as an individual, tell me, you are a beneficiary of good corporate governance because you're entitled to water. You are entitled to electricity. You are entitled to the necessities of life. And you can only get this if the companies who are the providers of the goods and services are effective. So every individual is interested, should be interested in corporate governance, because the performance of companies, private and more importantly, public companies, affect you in terms of the environment, as I said, in terms of water, electricity, education, health. So corporate governance affects everybody. For companies, it is important because that is what unlocks the key to their prosperity and sustainability. For governments, they should be interested because state-owned enterprises, reflect or put in action government's policies. And with all the problems we are having, with fiscal management, economic development and all that, it's about time state-owned enterprises are equipped to run on their own balance sheet. They should be able to operate on their own balance sheet. They should be able to borrow money on their own balance sheet. So they should be weaned off central government funding. And I believe that will bring a lot of relief to our economy. SMEs. Our economy really is based on SME activities. Sure. And inside the SME sector, you have family-owned businesses. Most businesses are not sustainable. You know, they take their corporate form, but effectively, they are individuals, they are entrepreneurs who have their own vision, they've set up the business, but there's no formality to the business. So you realize that most businesses are not sustainable. When the shocks of the economy hit them, they cannot be sustained because they do not have the structures in place, they do not have risk management in place, they do not have a succession plan in place. It's like a one-man business. And I think that we should really encourage and support our SMEs so that they put structures in place which will be the foundation of their business. And lastly, apart from individuals, corporate governance cuts across every company, every enterprise, no matter the size. It affects churches, it affects charities, it affects NGOs, golf clubs, football clubs, of course. Every activity in a nation should be grounded on sound corporate governance.
Wow. So I am struggling to understand why lots of SMEs, in terms of being formal, are only formal as far as they've been to the Registrar General to incorporate the business. Why is this all-important issue and pillar in growing business so lost on us?
Because we need to give them support in terms of training. Most of the time, when people set up companies, they're entrepreneurs. Maybe they have the capital initially, so they set it up. So they think that this is my business, I own this business. Why should I put structures in place which will restrict what I want to do? Why should anybody tell me what I have to do? Why should I bring an independent board in place to give me direction, to oversee me? It's my business, it's my money. So people like to hold on to their vision and like to hold on, you know, to their businesses because, well, it's my business. And I think that we need a lot of training so that they understand that we are not talking about your business today, we are talking about the sustainability of your business. Right. And I keep on telling businessmen that you should run your business in such a way that your business does not need you. Your business will run on itself by itself because you put the structures in place and you can enjoy the benefits of your labor. Putting structures in place, put controls in place, put a succession plan in place. You know, there should be a division between ownership and management so that your business will run. And I think that we need a lot of education because most of the time, you know, there's a lot of talk about supporting SME business. SMEs don't have capital when they go to the bank. But of course, providing capital in terms of debt or equity can be a problem. Because if an investor wants to invest in a business, the first thing the investor is going to look out for is your corporate governance.
Because that provides the assurance.
It provides assurance that if I invest in this company, it will run in such a way that I'll get my dividend. Okay? I will get my, and I'll get capital gains as well. If a bank is going to give a business a loan, you're also looking at the risk profile. And the higher the risk, the higher the interest rate. And it is because maybe you do not have a board, you don't even have a formal accounting system. There are no structures in place, and risk management is so weak. Risk management is so weak with our businesses. So you have a challenge. And there has to be a way of supporting businesses to understand that it is in their interest. And I also keep on saying that the fact that you run a business does not mean really that nobody should care. Because as I pointed out to you earlier, your business affects a third party.
True.
The quality of your services the quality of your products, affects a third party. So when you start running a business in the country, it's not only your business. It affects other people. It affects the environment. It affects your employees. So today, corporate governance is moving away from shareholder, and you realize that now corporate governance talks more about stakeholders.
Because that's more broader.
Exactly,
It takes care of the
because
entire value chain.
shareholder more is about profit. But you have employees.
They have families.
Exactly. If the business goes down, what do? There are other stakeholders in terms of social interventions, environmental issues. Okay, people who are interested in your business. So we should move beyond, it is my business, because your business is within a certain society, it is within a certain region, a certain country, and it affects everybody. So I think that we should start, changing our thinking about this is my business. Yes, it is your business, but your business is separate from you. And I give the example of when you give birth to a child. It is your baby, but the child has a life of its own. And it's your responsibility to make sure that you develop the child, you give the child nutritious food, you educate the child, and it stands on you. So even if it's your baby. So one of the things that really has people have to be educated about is the separation of ownership.
From management.
Exactly. You own the business, but the company, especially if you set up the company, it is your company, but it has its own distinct life and entity.
What you just said made me remember the story of the co-founder of Apple Computer, Steve Jobs, that at some point in the 80s, his own business fired him as CEO.
Exactly. Because even though you're a shareholder, sometimes you can act contrary to your business's vision. When you're a shareholder, most of the time, maybe you're thinking of profit. But because of this stakeholder involvement, you may not think about profit at a particular point in time, because there are other issues that you have to deal with. Maybe you're thinking of growth, you're thinking of developing your employees, you're thinking of doing so many other things. So it is really important that you have that independence in the business, and that is where the board comes in play, that you have an independent board of directors.
Not your cousins and uncles and friends.
Certainly not. And that's one of the major problems. I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to talk about that. So you have an independent board which is acknowledging that, you are the owner of the business, but we're here to direct you, to control you, to give you guidance, and make sure that stakeholder interest and the interest of the business you set up, even though it's your business, the role of the board is to make sure that the business succeeds.
So I'm a young entrepreneur, start a business. What's the optimum number of people that I should have on a board? And, already, if I don't have a lot of money how do I ensure that I'm putting in place these structures, even for a startup that's struggling?
Yeah. It is a real challenge for a lot of young people or, startup businesses. What we do advise is that let your business evolve with the appropriate structures. So at the startup stage, you're talking about the vision, you're an entrepreneur. You don't have to rush into setting up a full-blown board. What you can do to make sure that you have independence when you start and you don't have money is that you can even have a two-member, what we call an advisory board, which is different from a board of directors. But an advisory board, two people you respect, who have experience in management, experience in the industry, to guide you. You don't even have to pay them. Well, because you look for the right people. There are so many people who have the experience and excited about sharing their experience and helping people who have started companies to succeed. So look for those people, the experienced people who have gone through the mill, they understand business, they understand the challenges, and get them to give you informal guidance. As your business grows, then you evolve from an advisory board, and then you set up a board of directors. a board of directors which has more formality, which will bring independence. But you have to be careful how you set up the board. Mm-hmm. Do you want us to talk about board composition now or later? Because
no, we can look at the board composition.
Because, and let me look at it in a broad sense, mm-hmm. both at SOE level and in your private businesses. The key to success in terms of corporate governance mm-hmm. for any company is the board of directors, because the board of directors is the focal point of corporate governance. The board has responsibility for implementing corporate governance. So the key thing is the composition of the board. So what do we do? People call friends and cousins, acquaintances. Oh, I need to fulfill all righteousness. Mm-hmm. I need a board in place, so come. But these are people who may not give you the right direction because they may not even have the experience. So if you get the composition of your board wrong, you have a problem. Now let me go to the public sector and mm-hmm. talk about composition of boards in the most of the time, when boards are being constituted, we make the mistake of thinking about names first. Mm-hmm. I know this person, I know that person, this person is a party member, this person I owe you, I need to put you on the board to reward you and all that. That's fine, but we have to think of the skills and expertise that you need on the board before you start putting in names. So depending on the industry, the first thing is that what do I need? What skill, what expertise, what diversity of skills? So you look at the diversity of skills. Mm-hmm. I need maybe a finance person, and for me that's non-negotiable. Maybe I need a lawyer. I need somebody who has industry knowledge. And beyond that, you have to think of integrity. Mm-hmm. And most importantly, independence. You want people on the board who will tell you the truth and who are not afraid to walk away, because they are people of integrity and they will tell you the truth. Again, in the composition of a board, there are things that come into play, like maybe gender balance, age balance. Because some time ago, the perception was that, oh, this person has worked so many years, he's retired, so we'll put him on the board. This person is an accomplished lawyer. This person is accomplished, but it's all false. It's not about what you've accomplished before. It is about what you're going to do. The fact that you're an accomplished lawyer does not mean you'll be a good director, because directorship comes with its own skills and knowledge. So we have to make sure that the composition is right. And most of the time, boards fail because they are dysfunctional. The chemistry is dysfunctional. So you end up maybe putting together a board and you realize that you don't even have a finance person on the board. It's because you're thinking of names. So the first thing is that, what skill set do we need?
So strip it down to the function of the board, what you want it to achieve, the various people that you want in there, per skill, expertise, and all the diversities that you need to ensure that your vision is achieved.
Yeah. And then the personal traits of integrity. Right. And all that. That is how you put a board together.
That's interesting. We're going to explore in the next segment after the break how this sits, that the context of setting up a board in the public sector and in the private sector. Stay with us. We'll be right back. This is the Executive Lounge. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Addo, and my guest, corporate governance consultant, Mrs. Marian Barnor. You shared some insights on how a company's success is hinged on the composition of the board or the setting up of the board. Yes. I'd like you to, per your vast experience, appraise how well we've gotten corporate governance in the public sector within Ghana.
In terms of the composition of the board.
In composition and the outcomes that we've seen, possibly as a result of that composition.
Okay, I think that there's a structural problem in how boards are put together in the public sector. First of all, the problem is that most of the acts or laws setting up the state-owned enterprises lag behind best practice in corporate governance. So the appointment process is a problem. You have the appointing authority appointing the board chairman, and appointing the CEO. Corporate governance insists that because the board is the ultimate authority, the board should appoint the CEO. But where you have another appointing authority appointing the CEO and the board and the chairman, it creates a problem because sometimes the CEO does not feel responsible to the board because after all, the board did not appoint him. The board chairman did not appoint him. So if there is a problem, he goes back to his source of power. And it leaves the board helpless.
But isn't it very intriguing to learn that per that example, the CEO,
yes,
who's tasked to run the business on a day-to-day, the board and the board chair who superintends on the board's activities are all drawing their power from the singular source. What kind of challenges do you think this would create?
Well, the first challenge is that sometimes the CEO does not feel responsible to the board. How does the board assess the CEO when the board has no power to appoint him or dismiss him? Because the role of the board is to appraise and assess the CEO. But if you appraise and you assess the CEO and you don't have the power to sanction him, what is the point? Again, some of the acts and laws, interestingly, have the ministers as chairpersons of the board. And that also creates a problem. In the first place, in my experience working with some of the state-owned enterprises, some of the ministers are too busy because there are ministers over a whole sector, and some of the ministries have so many boards under the sector. So the minister is the chairman of the board. The minister sometimes does not have time to chair the board, so it's a problem. The minister's role is policy direction and supervisory oversight. So if a minister has that oversight and is chair of the board and there's a problem, who do you go to? Because as a board in that sector, if you have a problem, you go to the minister. Interestingly enough, if you see some of the acts, they stated clear that any person who on 3 consecutive occasions misses a board meeting is out.
And the same minister is unable to attend all board meetings, but is the chairman.
Yeah. So that also leads to the issue of enforcement, weak enforcement of our laws and regulations. So the composition is a problem with public sector. And beyond that, if you need to appoint the people you want to appoint, then train them. But most of the time, people are appointed and they are thrust into that position and have no clue. So today, you see that there's a lot of conflict between board members and CEOs and between boards and... Because sometimes people think that I'm a board member, so I need to go and dictate and run the show. But it's completely different. People don't understand the rules, so there has to be clarity. I am even advocating that at least in the public sector, when appointments are made, there has to be a mandatory training program. Just don't assume that somebody worked somewhere for so many years and is accomplished and is this and that. He can run a company or he can be a director. And I think that we should have strong advocacy to ensure that anybody, especially in the public sector, who goes onto the board is trained. So you know where your limits are. As a board, you know it's giving direction, providing advice, delegating, overseeing strategy. but you are not there to do the day-to-day work. So there are conflicts between CEOs and chairpersons, and I think it is a matter that has to be addressed as soon as possible, because working as a corporate governance consultant, I do know there are conflicts between CEOs and chairpersons because of the rules. You know,
we've either evolved into or developed or inherited a political system where boards of SOEs are dissolved immediately. There's a power change or a change in government, rather. Is that a sound practice for a country that's hoping to develop?
It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge because one thing about boards too is that there has to be continuity. But let me say that even though there has to be continuity, there has to be also a way of checking directors who don't perform so that they can exit. But if a board is performing and it's performing well, I don't see any reason why it should be changed just because there's a change of government. But that's a major challenge. I don't have an answer to, and I don't think it will change, unfortunately.
But if it doesn't change, I mean,
politics.
if that does not change, wouldn't that
You know,
be
so
creating...
that is what brings in play the "this is my time" syndrome. Because when new boards are put in place, sometimes people think, "Oh, this is my time. I worked for my government. I've worked for my party. I deserve." And some people think that maybe it's payback time, you know. So we have to think more. It's a whole orientation. I don't know how it will be done, but it's a whole orientation of thinking that I want to work for my company, I want to work for my government, I want to work for Ghana. So if there's a board in place and it's performing, any government should be happy, you know, to work with a board which is performing. If the board is not performing, fine. But if the board is performing and is producing results.
So we, as a country, we have a very interesting ability to mix the traditional governance and the democracy that we're practicing. So,
but let me say that I don't think it's only in Ghana, because I think that even in America, you know, when administrations change,
boards do change.
I think so, especially the administration. Everybody goes.
Okay.
And new people come in.
But somehow they seem to keep the continuity going.
Because the structures are in place. So no matter personalities that go, if you're a new personality and you come in, the systems run. The structures are in place, the processes are in place, the rules are in place, the regulations are in place. And more importantly, the principles of governance are in place, because corporate governance is about accountability. Corporate governance is about accountability. How do you exact accountability from people who are put in positions of trust? It's about accountability. It is about responsibility. It is about independence. It is about creating a balance between social objectives and economic objectives. It's about transparency is key. Because people go in there, they don't even hold annual general meetings. You know, some time ago, to ensure accountability, state-owned enterprises, quite a number of them were converted into limited liability companies. But check and find out how many of them, under the Companies Act, even hold annual general meetings where directors and management can be held to account.
Well, some are way behind on filing their end-of-year accounts anyway. So.
And how many of them even go to a board evaluation process to assess the performance of the board?
So there's board evaluation processes as well?
There is board. Today, corporate governance says that at the end of the year, boards should be evaluated by an independent evaluator and through self-assessment. Because as a board, you sit supervising management. So you think that because I'm supervising management, nobody supervises me, but you're also accountable. So boards should be evaluated on their performance to make sure that they're doing the right thing.
Because ultimately, the direction that they point the business in it will determine whether it succeeds or fails.
Boards should be evaluated. They should be evaluated. Are they on track? Are the directors even coming to meetings? Are they coming to meetings on time? Are they preparing adequately? Do they understand the business? What role do they play in strategy, in risk management, in controls, in setting up the culture? Because as a board, their responsibility is defining the culture. Because if you don't define the culture of an organization, the culture will find its way. So it is very, very critical that boards should be run effectively and efficiently. It is very critical. It is very critical.
I've been wondering, and no disrespect to traditional rulers, but especially in the public sector, you tend to find that when boards are constituted, you'll find a chief or a queen mother on there. Is that the most efficient approach to constituting a board in a country like Ghana, where we feel that everybody should be giving a place at the table?
I said earlier that when you're constituting a board, you have to look at the skills and diversity of skills that you need. So if you think that a chief can bring a certain value, because the chief represents a constituency, and depending on the industry, I don't think that should be a problem. But you have to make sure that the chief is equipped to perform in that role and not just go into the boardroom in and out without any contribution. Because sometimes you put people in a boardroom because of the clout they have and because of the network they bring and what they can bring to the company. So depending on what the chief can bring to the table and the value he brings, I wouldn't say that no chief should be on the board. But we have to make sure that you're not bringing a chief on board just because he's a chief, but he has something to contribute. And that you should have to define what he contributes. That is why it is good that when you are constituting a board, you set the skills required. It makes it easy because, I want this person has this value, this person belongs to this industry, this person belongs to this region, this is what the person can bring. But if you bring a chief in just because he's a chief and has nothing, it creates a problem.
I guess it goes very similar to the gender argument.
Exactly.
That it's not just about filling the room with balancing the gender.
Yes, it's not about, it's about women who can bring something to the table. And as you know, there's so many women who can bring something to the table. Again, one of the things that has to be considered is the age balance. Some time ago, you would see that mainly older people, retired people are brought on the table because their thinking was that, their experience and all that. And I pointed out that not necessarily. The fact that you've worked for 40 years does not make you a good director. So inside the boardroom, there has to be a balance in terms of age because younger people are very innovative. In today's world, IT, they are not risk averse. They come up with wonderful ideas. So you have a balance of younger people in the boardroom being dynamic, coming up with strategic initiatives, innovations, and then maybe you have the older people who have gone through the mill and saying that, wonderful, but let's hold on. What are the risk factors? So you have that balance. And of course, for the sake of continuity too, you need that balance. Okay. So composing a board is about the skill set. It's about gender balance, age balance, ethnicity is important, religion is important, And let me quickly add that even if you have all that, corporate governance is not a standalone. Corporate governance needs a very effective legal and regulatory environment. I point out to you that some of the acts of SOEs does not sit well with corporate governance. So even though there is the intention,
it creates a conflict right from the beginning.
So even if there's an intention, you have an act which says, for example, that the internal auditor reports the CEO. Who does that today? The internal auditor reports to the board. But there's an act of parliament or a law for a certain SOE, which I have seen and read, which says that the internal auditor reports to the CEO.
So if the malfeasance is from the CEO's office,
who checks it?
Wow.
So that is why in trying to improve our corporate governance, we should go back and look at the legal framework. quickly, especially for the state-owned enterprises, and try, to amend the acts and the laws.
While in that public space, should MPs be on boards?
My answer is a big no.
Why not?
The role of the MP is to act on behalf of the people of Ghana. Am I right?
Yes.
So it is the duty of the MPs to exact accountability from public boards on behalf of the people. So if you are there to exact accountability from the public boards and you become a player, I like football, so I always like to talk about referee, linesman, or player, referee, and linesman. I'm very sad England lost yesterday, but I knew they would not make it. But anyway, so if you are an MP and you are supposed to act on the people, on behalf of the people, and suit to their interest, and exact accountability for the state institutions, how do you go in there and become a player? And tell me, what happens when the Auditor General presents the report of your institution of which you are a board member to the Public Accounts Committee? Aren't you in a conflicted situation as an MP? I do not think MPs should be on boards.
Wow.
They'll be in a position of conflict. I know that a lot of MPs are on boards, but I think that we should start looking at some of these things.
If indeed we want to progress
Exactly.
and achieve more than we already have,
Yes.
we have to relook at these things.
Yes.
We're going to take our final break, and when we come back, we'll be in the back street learning some more from my guest, Mrs. Marian Barnor. She is a very passionate corporate governance consultant. Stay tuned, don't go away. You're welcome back to the Executive Lounge with me and Shira Addo, and my guest, Mrs. Marian Barnor. She's a corporate governance consultant, shared great insights with us, and we're in the back straight, so make sure you pick some more lessons as we wrap up this conversation. Mrs. Barnor, your experience, I mean, you've seen lots. You've seen what could be better, and certainly what shouldn't be done. And I'm sure in that time you've been able to imagine or think about what we ought to be doing if we're going to see a better state of corporate governance in Ghana. So I'd like you to break down what you think should be the future orientation and practice for SMEs, for the public sector, and any other stakeholder in corporate governance that you believe has a role to play.
I think that we should start seeing corporate governance, the importance of corporate governance in terms of national development. Because it is said that better companies make better societies. So if we're going to drive this nation in terms of economic development, we have to focus attention on corporate governance and move beyond the rhetoric. Because everybody is now, corporate governance. When a bank feels lack of corporate governance, when this company feels lack of corporate governance. But then there has to be an intentional, deliberate, and conscious efforts to implement good corporate governance. And I think the first thing is that as a country, we should provide some guidance. So Ghana must develop a generic corporate governance code. Generic in the sense that it can be tweaked and applied to different industries. But Ghana should be able, Nigeria has a code, Zambia has a code, I know Kenya has a code. Some time ago, I know that the Securities and Exchange Commission, but that was for a specific sector. But Ghana as a nation, if we are serious, we should develop Ghana's code for corporate governance, which gives direction to everybody, every organization, every business, every enterprise, every NGO, every football club, every church, so that it permeates the fabric of our society. So that's the first thing. We should make it, we should set people thinking when they are asked to go on boards. Because sanctions should be applied for directors who fail. because people think that, oh, going on the board is a status symbol. Now, when you choose to go on the board, you think twice. That is why in the developed states, they go for directors' insurance to protect them against any liability that any stakeholder will take. But in Ghana, directors go supervise a company, the company goes bust, they walk away, and nobody says anything. But directors must be made responsible, and they be made accountable. So that is where we have to put in the frameworks, guidance. Boards must be trained. Directors must be equipped. Take them through training. I believe that every director must appreciate financial statements. Otherwise, what are you doing on the board? You take the company's balance sheet.
You should be able to tell what it means.
Yes. I'm a lawyer. I don't like figures. But my training, if you put a balance sheet in front of me, if you put management accounts in front of me, because of my training and my background, I can ask questions. I can challenge. I can punch holes. I can congratulate. You see that the company is doing well. What if a company's budget is brought to the boardroom table? You don't understand anything. So I think that, again, there has to be an accreditation program. You know, we have institutions who can help to put together training, especially for SOE directors. Training, understanding what corporate governance is, the distinct role of the board, the distinct role of management. What is risk management? What is financial management? What is culture? Ethics, integrity, how boards should work. We should equip them before they go into the boardroom. So a code, a national code, frameworks, guidance, and there should be incentives and sanctions.
Incentives and sanctions.
You know what? There's something that I've always thought about. And that's an experience in some other countries. When you go onto a board of a public sector, you are serving the nation and you are serving the public. So why is there so much disparity in directors' fees? So people clamor, I don't want to mention names of companies, but people clamor to go on some boards.
I'm sure nobody would want to sit on a Ghana Library board.
But I think that is the most important.
I
think Ghana Library Board, because if
we want to be on the Cocoa Board.
I've not said anything. I'm not mentioning names.
Or the ECG board.
I am not mentioning any name. But I'm saying that it's good you brought up Ghana Library Board. We are talking about economic development. We are talking about education, free SH and all that. Because we see the importance of education. And why should a director of library board not be on the same fee? I don't know what their fees are, but I'm assuming they are low because it's a library board and maybe they don't generate. But the government should recognize that not every public enterprise was set up to make profits. Some make profits, some intervene socially, okay? So there has to be a way of aligning the fees so that people don't scrabble for the juicy boards. Library board is so important. And yet I don't know what their fees are, but it's just an example. And your guess is good, but I can bet that a director on the library board will not.
It's nowhere near somebody on the TOR board or maybe COCO board or ECG.
So I think that we have to look at that so that people will feel empowered, people will feel appreciated. And there will be sanctions too. You know, if you take an annual report of some of these multinational, they report even on director attendance.
Wow.
Because some people are there, they don't attend, they get their fees, they don't really attend, and they don't prepare. So preparation is important. And I think that training is important. I also would suggest that for the SME sector, it's only training and education. Because if the SME sector succeeds, government succeeds. Because our economic activity is to a large extent SME based. So maybe the Minister of, Business Development should take a serious look at how SMEs, can be structured, how they can be trained, how they can be supported so that their corporate governance evolves. You just don't go and impose it on them, but educate them, train them, let them get the understanding, and slowly evolves. But at least they must have a formal, accounting structure. They have to have independence, somebody to advise them, and all that. And the registrar of companies too. I think that right now the companies, some changes have been made to the Companies Act, but corporate governance involves more.
Okay.
So that's why we should have the corporate governance guidelines and the code.
Okay.
So there has to be incentives and sanctions.
So it seems, you talked about the SOEs and what they need to do. In my line of work, sometimes you read the Auditor General's report and then you get very concerned. And has the media got a role to play in all of this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How?
The media is the water for society. So the media, there should be a focus on training the media to understand what corporate governance is and what is expected of the board, what is expected of directors, so the media can educate the public, but not only educate the public, can start asking questions. The media should be able to take one organization and find out, in this organization, do you have an executive chairman? And you have some organizations where the chair has an office there, the chair becomes an executive chairman. You should start probing these things, but you can only do that if you are trained. Ask, how is the board accounting? Do you have an AGM? And if you don't have an AGM, why not? Because the Companies Act insists that every year companies, state-owned or not, which are registered under the Companies Act, should have AGM. That is where you account stewardship. The parable of the talents.
The talent, yeah.
I gave you this.
What are you returning?
So, the media has to hold public companies to account. And I think that this is an area that the media should pay. We keep on talking about political events, but we're talking about economic development. And economic development can only come through public institutions, state institutions, the commercial enterprises. So the media has a big role to play.
Well, we'll take up the challenge, and a big thank you to you, Mrs. Marian Barnor. So I share with you 5 things I'm taking away from this conversation. Number 1 is that for every desire or vision that you have, you're always going to need a guide rail. And that's your board. They guide how your business goes, they guide how your life goes. So whether you're in business or in your life, you're always going to need a number of people that you are accountable to. People who are independent-minded, they're not afraid to tell you the truth to your face, whether it gets uncomfortable or not. And that's something you can apply in your business. Number 2 is that in selecting people, you must first of all ensure that they're people of integrity. So you don't take advice from everyone. The people who have led by example are people that you can go to and take advice from. Number 3 is that in our lives, we have to be accountability oriented. That your life is a gift to you, but it also is a seed to the world. And so as you live life, you must ensure that you are giving back to society. And if you're establishing a business, that business is accountable to the society within which it operates. So you're ensuring that you're doing things according to best practices. You're not polluting your environment. You're not underpaying people, because everything you do has an impact and effect on everyone else. The key is to be a good steward and render the right accounts. Number 4 is learning. Development. Invest in learning about the journey you're going to take. You should know the roadmap. You should know the potential pitfalls. You should know how to handle those challenges when they come. And that comes from investing in acquiring further knowledge. And if it's a board you want to constitute, maybe as an entrepreneur, my friend, you need to go and learn how to constitute a board. I'm sure Mrs. Barnor will be happy to give you those insights. And the final thing I'm taking away from this is that you must have conviction. Conviction of purpose, conviction of the future, the responsibility you have to the future. Posterity is what eventually judges all our actions. So as you go about your day, as you go about life, as you dream up that next business you want to start, as you serve on that board or as you work in that organization, are you convicted that your actions today will make tomorrow better for the ones who come after you? These are things that I hope have added something to your knowledge base. Thank you once again, Mrs. Barnor.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Wonderful. And to you, thank you so much for tuning in, and to the crew and our friends at Villa Monticello, we're grateful. And see you again next week when we bring you another edition of the Executive Lounge. I'm Inshirado. As always, go forward, make rain. Shalom.